message. And you know, it's not the amount of ink that's on the paper, it's the way the ink makes a language on the paper.
The design of it.
Right. And it's not the way the sound waves come through the air, it's the specific way the sound waves are arranged in a language to come through that makes sense to other people. For instance, if you don't understand English, you're not going to understand the message that we're giving out here right now. But if you understand that language, you'll understand it right away.
Well, even you, Mike, in bringing this point out, you have to think of the word before you communicate that word. So, and where did that thought come from? Where did that information of that thought come from?
My mind. And that's where all information that we know of comes from. So when science tries to be science and tries to say that all this information evolved from a non-mind, it's almost a silly idea. It's like this book, which I love, by the way, In 6 Days. It's a testimony of 50 scientists who think the way we do. Pretty impressive scientists, too, that they chose here. They're all living today, unless a couple passed away in the last year or two. But, you know, to think that a book like this, or just 2 pages like that, can come randomly by chance over time, it makes no sense to the human mind. But yet, if you want to avoid the idea of a God that can give information through prophets and put it into a book, or to put information into the cell and DNA and creating all of us, if you want to avoid the original source of all life being a God, the best way to get rid of a God is to say, well, you don't need one, everything happened naturally. And that's what Jesus says the main problem of mankind is. Most of us really don't want there to be a God, because down deep we know that there's a moral law, and we want to break it a lot of the time and do our own thing.
Yeah, we have to submit to parents, submit to bosses, submit to teachers. We don't like to submit, period.
And then there's that moral law, thou shalt not covet, written in our minds. You shall not steal from each other. Something in all of humans, no matter what culture group, ethnic group you come from, most people, any ethnic group I've found, they don't like to have their things stolen. It's kind of universally written in the human mind, heart, soul, that there's a law that says you shall not steal. It's there, and it's universal. Doesn't matter. It's been throughout history, and God's written it into our consciousness. So anyhow, so let me go on with what Baumgartner said.
Go ahead.
And so Baumgartner goes on here and says, he calls this, he says scientists recognize this as something that Einstein talked about the Einstein gulf, that language represents a category of reality distinct from matter and energy. Einstein recognized that, I guess before DNA and everything. In any case, he goes on and says, where does linguistic information originate? What is the ultimate nature of the human mind? If something as real as linguistic information has existence independent of matter and energy, from causal considerations, is it not unreasonable to suspect that an entity capable of originating linguistic information is also ultimately non-material in its essential nature? He says, then he goes on and concludes, and he says that an immediate conclusion is that materialism, which has long been the dominant philosophical perspective in scientific circles, with its foundational presupposition that there's no non-material reality, is simply and plainly false. It is amazing that its falsification is so trivial, he says, that there has to be non-material mind behind the DNA. Well, if you think about it deeply, it has to be that way, because you're not going to get it originating out of chemicals, a message coming out of chemicals that's as long as this book, and it's actually a lot longer.
You know, Mike, everything you're throwing at us here is hard to comprehend. It really is when you think about it, that information came from nothing, when actually it came from a supernatural something. I'm really, it's so mind-boggling. It's hard to grab a hold of. So since our mind can't comprehend that, we'd want to try to grab a hold of something that's a lot more simpler. But when you think about it, evolution is more complex than that, because they're saying this information came from the primordial soup in a chemical reaction. This information that's coming out of our mouth right now came from a rock, raining on a rock, versus this designer of this complex information system that we have. Really, I mean, which one's harder to believe in?
You know, I have my thoughts, you have your thoughts. People in Japan have their thoughts. Everyone in Germany has their thoughts. In Russia, you know, every one of us can be planning for Monday. And in our plans, they'll all be different. I might want to call my uncle so-and-so, but you over there in Russia has a plan to do something else. You're thinking different thoughts. We're all made out of the same material. We all have the same energy, but we all have different thoughts because those thoughts are originating out of our own minds, and we're independent of the material that we're made of, and we use our mouth, the material we're made of, the flesh and bone, and to move around our jaw and everything, and mouth to utter the information to others. But those thoughts are different. They're originating from non-material mind. And you know, I'd like it, you know, thinking about it in the past, and I've mentioned it before, it's like, you know, if you have a computer with, you turn it on, it's got energy, and it doesn't matter, you're not going to add anything to its matter by weight, by whether the bits which give the information, they're on-off switches. That's all the computer is, on-off, one way or another, on-off, and you just add them all up and you make a language. Jeremy will be right with you. So you've got this computer with bits, on and off, on and off. It doesn't matter. You can give different messages, this one on, off, on, off. You know, depending on how you do it, you've got a different code and a different message, different language, but it doesn't change the weight or the amount of energy coming out of the computer. Those remain the same. The information changes because of the way you're moving those bits, but the weight of the computer, the energy used in the computer, the electricity being used, doesn't change one iota. It's the information you're giving it from your mind, and it's residing on top of then the program that's written, just like the information that is given on the DNA, the A, T, G's, and C's on the DNA, on the nucleotides. Those are carried on it. So it's just like that. Jeremy, what would you like to share with us?
Hey guys, you know, the problem with the evolutionists is they make it so complicated to understand how, you know, life works. You know, for them, they have to, you know, study for, you know, decades and years, and, you know, try to come up with all these theories and apply these theories and all this and that, and, you know, they just make it so complicated. The good thing about the God we serve is that he says, you know, I'm God, trust me, love me, serve me, and I'll give you all the information you'll ever need and more.
You know, in fact, Jeremy, God says that people that do that are suppressing the truth that they know in their hearts is there. It's in Romans chapter 1. That people just looking at creation, you know, the trees and the birds and the animals and us, and seeing the birth of anything, innately we understand that something has put all this together, that it just didn't materialize out of nothing. And he says we have to suppress it. And so God is agreeing with you, expressing it slightly differently there.
Yeah, it's just so complicated to be an evolutionist or somebody that just can't come to terms with there being a creator. It's got to be so troublesome, so complicated. I mean, they're just constantly battling each other, just trying to learn more knowledge. I mean,
and then there are consequences to evolution that have basically been incredibly negative. Yeah, religion has brought a lot of tragedy into the world, but not the religion that came from Jesus.